Pharmacy opened its doors. On August 16th, Richard Oborn, director for the Center of Cannabis at Utah Department of Health, reported the state had 8,261 active cardholders, which doesn't include the 6,041 still using unique recommendation letters. Although patient numbers are exceeding the state's initial projection, which was only 10,000 patients by the end of the first year, supply isn't keeping up with demand. Until a recent meeting with legislators and state representatives, much was still unclear about the participation of those who were awarded licenses from the Department of Agriculture to supply Utah's cannabis and various cannabis projects or products. To answer these questions, we'd like to introduce Utah's Green Scene to Cody James, the manager of industrial hemp and medical cannabis at the Utah Department of Agriculture. Hello, Cody. We're glad to have you with us at Salt Lake City.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
We'll get right into it. What was your journey in becoming manager of industrial hemp and medical cannabis at the Utah Department?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's been a whirlwind. So I've actually been with the state and at the Department of Agriculture for 15 years now. I started out back in 2005 as an investigator for the plant industry division, investigating pesticides and other chemical uses there. And then I actually followed my degree and my background into the animal side of things, where I ran the brand inspection program, and then I actually became the director of animal industries there for a little over 5 years there. As some things changed, this program was looking for someone to actually kind of help on the regulatory side as far as getting policies and procedures and some of the rules written and things like that. And I'd always been known as the person to kind of come in and help fix programs. So I kind of jumped at the chance to be able to come in initially and help start a new program. And then, a couple of months ago, not too long after we opened the first pharmacy, my boss, Drew Rigby, stepped away from the state, and I assumed some of his responsibilities.
And you were working alongside with Drew, and it sounds like when he left, you were ready to pick up right where he left off, right?
Yeah, well, at least I hope so. I think that we've done a good job. As I mentioned before, my job and my background's always been more in the policy and the procedures type of thing. And his job was more in the industry. And so we worked together very well to make sure that we had the program on both sides where it needed to get to while we was meeting those deadlines and getting growers up and running. And then again, getting a product out to the patients back in March.
And so some outsiders might be scratching their head wondering, what does the Department of Agriculture, other than growing, have to do with medical cannabis in the state of Utah? What role do you guys play?
Well, as you mentioned, not only do we just have the growers that we license and make sure are following the regulations, but we also have the processors there that we're doing similar things as far as licensing and the regulation side of things. But the Department of Agriculture is also the state laboratory that has really the lab right now that is doing the majority of the testing of the products before it gets to the end consumer. But really, we're going to be the tester of the testers, so to speak, as we move forward with this program. So we've got the lab, but overall, initially, our job was to get things up and running, was to have something that I'm not really looked at as an agricultural commodity at this point, or got tasked with getting growers, because it was something similar to some of the other programs that we've had in the state. Although, again, we're talking medical marijuana, so nothing exactly. But we've had that experience with the processing side in some of our different divisions. We've had some with the growing side with some of our different divisions, and so we got tasked with that. And so, as I mentioned, from up to March, it was getting things up and running, making sure everything was getting licensed and is moving forward. And now, since that time, it is more kind of a consumer protection side of things on those production sides, making sure that our growers are growing, not just growing enough to supply the demand, but to make sure that the supply is safe. And then same on the processors. Are they following the good manufacturing procedures that allow them to get their license? Is everything that they're doing for concentrates going to be safe for the end consumer. And then, so we're just really making sure that that's being followed. And we all have that little bit of a regulatory portion that makes sure that none of this product is getting out into the public without following the correct or the legal process to get there.
Right. From grower to shelf to patients.
Right.
Those that were awarded cultivation licenses have experienced growing pains while ramping up operations, not to mention setting roots during a pandemic. Until last week's committee session, it was unclear what was happening with our 8 licensed cultivators. You reported during the meeting, all 8 were operational at this time. Why is there still a lack of products on the shelves right now?
I think part of it is that it does take some time, as those of the groups that are familiar with the product. It takes 4 to 5 months to get something from start all the way to finished product, and also the amount of money that's going into this. It was a struggle. The pandemic as well was something that I think a lot of our growers struggle with, to be able to raise the capital to keep that capital, as everybody felt kind of the pinch of the economy this last year. But the number of patients has really been an amazing. I think the Department of Health really did a good job of making sure that there was going to allow patients that needed the product to get those. And so our patient numbers have been just out of this world, which is a great thing there. But on the other side, because the process of producing this product take some time, that we were lagging behind. It wasn't something that everybody was able to bring in, a ton of product initially. It was going to have to be a grow situation and allowed to see what that market did. We did have a couple of fallbacks as far as some of our licenses had a tough time being able to get buildings. Some of it came down to, hey, a landlord found out that one of our licensees got a license, and so all of a sudden the rent tripled. So it's like
we heard about that story, and so they found a location since, but that is one of the shakeups, is they had a place found, and starting from zero to where they are now, it's not just planting seeds and growing cannabis. You have to find the location, build the location, get the utilities set up, and when the carpet's ripped from underneath them, like in this case, it makes things tough. So, but you brought up a really interesting point, and what I think a lot of our patients that are, I think it's safe to say, frustrated with the amount of products that is available. We have far more demand than anybody was expecting. Even those that are pro-cannabis in Utah and pushing to move this forward, I myself didn't expect to be approaching 10,000 patients by, I'm guessing we'll be there by the end of September. So that's a big struggle. Cultivation problems trickle down to processors as well. Currently, we have 7 processors that are licensed in the state. 4 more are coming on board, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Yes. We've actually got a meeting this afternoon. Our licensing board meeting will be looking to review an application of another one as well that should be able to get up and move and started running processing fairly quickly. So there's a good number of processors there. They're are all willing to do what it takes to get that product out as quickly as they can, but also, again, it's the safety situation. They don't want to make sure that whatever product they're producing is safe. And so there's the steps that have to be taken. But yeah, there's as you mentioned, the growers are all growing out. We're getting a continual amount sent to the processors, and then hopefully we can get to that point. One of the concerns we've ran into a little bit, I guess, is that the testing and things. Luckily, we do have another lab that is testing, so it wasn't just all put on our lab, the Department of Ag's lab, to do not only the testing for the product, but also do some of the other testing, regulatory tests that they do for the entire department. We have another lab that's come on board is really taking that time, lowering that to get product to the shelf as well.
State cultivators that we've talked to at Salt Lake City have complained that state testing has been a factor in getting harvest to shelf. What has been the struggle for state testing cannabis and cannabis products? I know you're short-staffed there, and again, being in a pandemic, but again, this is a whole new operation for the Department of Agriculture, so I'm sure there's a lot of learning involved too.
Exactly, yeah, and the staff that we did have, and they're all chemists, and they all do a great job. And but it wasn't a new situation that came through, and so we wanted to make sure that we were being correct in our evaluations as well on the testing side. And there was a lot of unknowns as well. How does medical cannabis, when you're testing for pesticides, is there going to be anything that comes up that spikes because of the terpenes and things like that? And that's the things that we're all learning to do. And so that it was slow, but I think it was like that for all the industry as well at the beginning. Even our growers being in Utah for the first time, a little bit different growing conditions. Same with the processors, first time doing something. Hemp on one side was something they've done before, but moving on. So it was just that little bit of a learning experience and trying to get it correct, but without, we wanted to be as quick as we could, but also we needed to follow the rules and we needed to make sure it was safe.
Right. And it is a new process that you have written out in law that you need to go through from grower to the scientist, we'll put it that way. Big question that we've been getting from a lot of the patients in the green scene is that are especially hip to the entourage effect, have been asking when terpenes will be available on product labeling. Do you have an expected date for that?
I don't. I don't. That usually falls. I mean, although we do oversee the processors, that's something we discuss with the Department of Health mostly on how they want it, because again, it's the medicinal side of things. They're really running the patient side as well as the pharmacy side. We work with them, trying to make sure that what is needed for the patient to know what they're getting there. But the terpenes, I think, are going to come as it matures as well. Just like everything, we're finding out ways to try and do things better. We're working with the public and licensees to figure out what is the best way to go forward. And we're looking at other states as well to see what is successful in those states to make sure that we are getting the right type of program running that benefits the industry the best way that we can.
And that is a huge advantage, looking at the others outside of Utah and what works for them, what doesn't. We're our own community here, and things are obviously going to be different than Colorado and California. Speaking of those cultures, though, we saw our first batch of high THC concentrates come out from Mother Liquor, and they took the initiative of putting the terpene profile on the box through their own testing. I know they had to go through you guys to make sure that that was okay. Is that something that you encourage or you don't frown upon other processors doing? As a
No.
consumer, it was exciting. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, no, I think just with everything else, when we're talking about an end consumer or a group that is invested like we have with this type of industry and this program, is that the more transparent that you can be on products and something that helps those groups. I think there's going to be more of an educational thing that comes out through our medical providers and things to find out that, so they can prescribe correctly. But I also know that there's a lot of patients that do their own research and find that. So I think that what they can find out, the more they know that can possibly help them for whatever reason, is really important. So we don't frown on too much of things. We try and make it again, keep it on the medicinal side, make sure that it is fits under our rules to keep the medicinal look as far as much as we can anyway.
And I think that's where the Department of Agriculture in Salt Lake City really agree, is the education factor. And that's our prerogative here for a huge chunk of the population that, is just unaware of what new science is coming onto the state. With our strain reviews, of course, we try to bring up a little bit of Utah cannabis culture in our content. Of course, we would like to keep things medical. But again, it's the education where I think we're going to make the most progress here in the state, which I appreciate what you're doing so far, and the education factor. The idea of Salt Lake City started in what we consider the epicenter of the green scene community at Moonlight Garden Supply. And they're located at 1573 South State Street next to Looking Glass. After the Farm Act took effect in late 2018, which allowed hemp farmers around the country, many of those in Utah, to grow hemp. Many of them were coming through Utah's only hydroponics store to get supplies. Um, and now many of these farmers are up in arms with changes to the hemp and cannabis laws your team has proposed to state legislation. And really, I think the most notable is the updating the definition of total composite THC to include delta THC 8. Um, Most hemp growers we talk to, if not all, already complain that the 0.3% THC threshold is already far too low and making farming difficult. By adding this extra cannabinoid, it seems to make things even harder. What was the logic behind this decision?
Yeah, so the 0.3% really comes down from USDA. One of the processes we're going through right now, working with USDA, is to make sure that our industrial hemp program does fit the requirements that USDA has set forth and become an accepted state to run under there, which we believe is better that we do it as a state and work with our growers than it is to have the federal government come in and deal with that side. Um, the thought process, like on the Delta 8 side of things, is actually based on that there is still some psychotropic effect of the Delta 8. And we feel in Utah, and talking with some of our other legislators and the commissioner and such, is that because of that situation being psychotropic, that we probably, at least for the foreseeable future, ought to be able to allow that because it's there. It's a new and upcoming thing that I think a lot of people are excited about, but probably should fit that under more of the medical side for the time being. And when I say time being, I don't know if I have an actual time that it should be there or if it'll ever leave that. But that's the thought behind that, is again to make sure that we don't have something that could be hurtful for the public if it goes unused. And there's just still a lot of research to be done on it, just like everything else that we have throughout this. We've mentioned it several times: education, and not just education to the public, but even on academia, making sure that we're going to find out so many different things in the coming years, that who knows what type of changes. We're fully expecting that there's going to be several changes almost yearly to this program for probably 10 years or more. I mean, it's just, I don't know if it's ever going to plateau as far as not moving forward educationally and with the information that's comes to be for anybody.
You're spot on, and there's new science being discovered daily almost with cannabis, new cannabinoids even that are being discovered that we didn't even know they were there, mostly because we didn't know to look for them. THCP being one, for example. With that being said, what are the chances of us finding a new cannabinoid tomorrow and having it written into state law? Is that something that's always up for debate, or something that I guess hemp farmers should be wary of?
Yep. I mean, there's probably a great chance of something like that happening. We try our best to keep up on the education and the information that's being released outside of the state. It sometimes it's just kind of the way that it is, that government runs a little slower than the real world sometimes, I guess. But we try our best. Yeah, we try our best to keep up on that and talk to those involved. We have our state chemist has a lot of experience in the cannabis side of things, and so he's got some great input. And we talk to our policy analyst and those around the industry as much as we can to make sure that we're not doing anything that hurts anybody, but also to do it what's right and foresee. The legislature did lay out, I think, pretty well what is expected of the medical cannabis industry or the program, I should say. And so we're trying to run that way. We've got a new commissioner who came on board a couple of months ago, Commissioner Wild, and he's been that type of way, as that, let's make sure that we're moving along with industry. We shouldn't be the ones that are making wholesale changes or anything like that. That should be our job, is more to be on the regulatory side, let other folks make policies in that aspect. So,
and that's one thing I'll definitely give you credit for, is you're working with state laws, but also federal laws, and it makes it tricky on what to decide and what's going to happen in the future. My opinion, and a lot of those in Utah cannabis culture kind of feel like Paul Revere and saying "Rec is coming, rec is coming." What are your feelings about that? How would that shake up the program? Is if tomorrow our country decides, cannabis is legal?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question, and actually, my team talks about it quite often. Sometimes as a joke, but sometimes seriously, it could happen at any time. And I know that there's a lot of push for it. So, I guess it would probably be dependent on how that does come out. Does it stay on the medicinal side federally, or does it become completely recreational? And what does that look like for us? And we just don't have an answer for that. No matter which side you step on that issue or want to sit on, that I'm sure it would make some changes to our program and for how the state looks at it entirely.
Right. Um, it excites me that we voted Prop 2 through with this inevitable future approaching, let's say, because in my opinion, the country would flip rec whether or not Utah wanted to or not, right?
Right.
So now that we've got a medical program in place, I think it would make that transition a little bit easier. And it would also give us the choice, I suppose, to keep things medical. Maybe expanding there, but that's just that's just pipe dreams. So we won't even go down that road.
Right.
Also included in your also included changes is adding a definition for derivative cannabinoids, synthetic cannabinoids, and THC delta 8. Can you clarify what this means a little bit more?
Yeah, and that's something it's fairly new to what we've been discussing. Just came up over the last month or so, but really we've been approached and I've heard about groups, turning cannabinoids or CBDs into the delta 8s and the things like that. And there's still, although it's now out there a little bit more, the public knows about this. There's a lot of people that are kind of on the cutting edge of this, that we've still got to make sure that it's safe for the end user. And so our concern there is just that what type of other monsters may be created while they're doing some of these things. And so we just, again, want to make sure that it's a safe process. We're not going to necessarily stop anybody from doing that. We're just going to want to make sure that that product that does come out through whatever process that they do use to make those changes is safe, that the product is safe, and that we have that understanding of what's going on there. So something that doesn't slip out there, whether on purpose or on accident, that could possibly hurt somebody.
Right. And synthetic cannabinoids brings up a lot of topics in my head. Marinol, for one, which is a pharmaceutical THC delta 9. Epidiolex, which I always pronounce that wrong, is pharmaceutical CBD. Do you think this pattern of pharmacizing the plant will continue to follow with CBC, CNB, CBG, and delta 8 even?
I do think that's there. You mentioned a great, some of the most well-known ones and the ones that are used by the majority of patients that do have those type of prescriptions. And I think that it's going to be that. I think with anything like this, that especially the more it helps, the more acceptable it becomes mainstream to the public, that I think we will see that. And again, it goes back to what we talked about several times before, is the education that comes along with it. The more we find out, the more I think that this product is going to be able to be used for a whole lot of different things. Synthetics sometimes too. I think the world for a couple of years thought every time you heard about synthetic marijuana, it was K2 or spice, which was one of the concerns there, which is always kind of in the back of our mind too for some of the things that we're doing there. But I think that in the state of Utah, with the willingness of the industry to do what the legislature laid out in front, I'm not so worried about that portion of it. It's, again, I think we're going to get good products for the industry, and it's a really, I think we did a good job picking out the right licensees for growing and processing, because that's their want to. I mean, obviously, there's always money involved with any business there, but they want to do a good product. They're meeting all the standards and the requirements they have to for state law, and they're going to keep pushing for it to be better. But they're always going to make sure that at the end that we're trying to get the least expensive product and the safest level product to those patients.
And, you brought up a really big point, because costs have been, I guess I'll just say, high right now. And again, we're in a new market. We only have 4 pharmacies out of 14 that have opened their doors. So competition hasn't really begun between them, which I suspect will happen. But right now it's hard for them to lower prices because state testing costs money. The process, everything costs money. What do we need to do to get costs to drop in the state?
Yeah, so the first thing that we're trying to do on the department level is to, and that's part of the legislative changes that we introduced the other day during the meeting, was to minimize testing a little bit. Flour, for instance, will be tested for most things from the cultivator, but may not have to have near as many tests based on where, that it's going to be sold as flour. So we're trying to minimize that to get that cost of testing down as much as we can. I think it's kind of a circle. The more pharmacies that we can open up, the more willing I think that the growers are going to be willing to produce product versus on the other. And I think it kind of goes, so on one side we could probably blame the growers or the producers, and then on one side we'd probably blame that there hasn't been enough pharmacies open. So I think it's both, but I do think that the Department of Health, the Department of Ag, as well as the licensees through all three aspects are working together, talking a lot, and trying to make sure that there's product out, although probably at a minimal amount right now, but is growing. As I mentioned in the meeting the other day, I see a huge amount increasing by December. As a matter of fact, one of the rule changes and statute change we did this last spring was to allow industrial hemp byproduct into the medical market. And since that time that I had the meeting last Wednesday, we've actually seen an uptick in that being the transfers happening. So now there is another chance for some of the concentrates to be out into the on the shelves too. So
We know a lot of great hemp growers here in the state, and it's great to know that they may have the opportunity to participate in this medical program with what they know best, because a lot of them are great growers that come with experience that's out of state. So bringing up this point that they're able to participate more inclusively in our medical program, we also impose only products and materials that are under the 0.3 total THC can be sold in state or shipped out of state. What will this mean for hemp farmers in the state?
So the hemp farmers in the state, it's not going to change too much other than it does allow another avenue for their certified industrial hemp biomass to go into an industry of another. Because they are licensed with us as an industrial hemp grower, and because of our state rules, but then also USDA to say that they have to be certified before they can move that, or the crop has to be destroyed, they can do that. Really where it comes into it is I think that there's starting to be a little bit more of a market for some of the CBD products with some THC, maybe kind of a 1-to-2 or 1-to-3 ratio that they can get into there. And so I think that market's going to pick up as well. One of the other things that we allowed for the industrial hemp side to come was really the hot oil was the thought. There's a lot of processors in the state had hot oil from processing hemp and didn't have anything they could do with it, at least legally. And
Right.
so, and we also knew, we had an idea just based on it being a new market that it was going to be a slow start for production, for supply. And so our hope was that the hot oil would have taken off a little bit sooner, and then it would have helped us have product on the shelves sooner. It didn't necessarily happen that way, but now we are starting to see that uptick. I think that there was probably some concern on how that was going to look, on where it was coming from or something, but we just didn't get a lot of interest in it like we thought it was going to up until recently. And now, like I said, we're getting quite a few transfers of hot oil over to the medical side.
And how many licensed growers do you have registered with the Utah Industrial Hemp Program as of today?
We're about 190 for
190. Okay, and that seems pretty consistent with where the numbers were last summer too. A lot of new LLCs were popping up, growers all over the state. Is the cost to obtain a license still $500?
It is, yes.
Right. And one of the changes to another proposition is changing that background checks will be included in the application process to get into the industrial hemp program now, right?
Yeah, so already there's a requirement that the applicant has to get a background check, but what we do is require them right now to get their own background check and send that to us within 3 months of application. A lot of the growers that renewed this year, part of it was because of the virus and a lot of things got shut down, but they had a difficult time being able to get their background checks to us in order for us to license. So we had to ask for some help on that and allowed some folks to get licensed and move forward without this in hopes we could get that background check. On the other hand, on the medical side, it actually is allowed for in law that they can go get their fingerprints and then we can see their background check ourselves and it stays in our system for the entirety of the time that they're licensed. And so in order to kind of ease that burden on the grower or the licensee on industrial hemp, that if we was able to do that, they would only have to go get their background check one time and then we would be able to see that. So it saved them a cost overall throughout the years of not having to do that and probably allow things to be run a little bit smoother for renewal processes when we go to license our growers and our processors on the hemp side. And that was really the thought process with it. What can make it easier on them moving forward instead of always having to wait for the FBI to send them their background checks. And if it's just too far, if it's only 4 months ago, then maybe it doesn't matter. So we just thought if we had that on an upkeep for year round and for until they decide to no longer be licensed, then it would probably help out the process of licensure.
And with most of these hemp farmers here in the state, do you find that they're mostly industrial hemp farmers, or are they falling on the medical side?
Yeah, the majority, if not all of ours, are mostly falling onto the oil side. So they're, if we're going for CBD, I do know there's a big push. We've worked with the CBD collective on keeping it more of on the industrial side. I've met with them on several occasions, and it's a great group that's pushing, to use industrial hemp on more of building and fabric and things, and that's a great thing. But right now, I think the market really pushes it to go to cannabinoids.
And the Utah CBD Collective, they're great people, and they're a great resource for hemp farmers here in the state that are trying to just operate as a business. Do you think that they'll be a great resource for these proposals that may be taking effect, for the changes that will be happening to hemp farmers?
Yeah, I do think so. I think that the hemp farmers, and they're looking, and I think they're on their way to do that, is to make sure that they are part of an association or several associations to help make that push. That's usually how everything goes, and to allow any changes or to really come forward. As I mentioned before, Commissioner Wild is wanting us to work along with industry, to work along with the state or the people in Utah to do that, but it's through dialogue. And one of the things that we've tried to do at the Department of Ag is I'm open to conversation at any single time and to have conversation about that. And I've had several of them just in the last couple of weeks, but I'm open to listen to anybody. There's people who have been in this industry a lot longer than I have and have some great ideas. I just ask that, hey, if you come with a problem, let's also have a solution at hand, and I can bring that forward.
Amen.
And we may not be the group that takes that to the legislature and say, hey, this is what we want, but we could be the ones that are sitting in the front row. And when the legislature turns us to say, what does the Department of Ag think? Say, yeah, we've talked about it. We think it's a great deal, or whatever the situation may be. And that's kind of how we want to run moving forward.
Right. And making your voice heard. You brought up one of my favorite sayings is, don't bring problems to the table unless you have solutions. So bring the solutions, and it sounds like your door is open for growers to contact you with what they feel should be changed or what shouldn't be changed in the upcoming proposals. And it sounds to you that these aren't set in stone. These can be changed if you find right reason to, right? What's the best way for people to contact you, I guess?
Just my phone number at the department or an email. It's pretty busy for us. I've got a small team for the amount of work that we do, so we stay fairly busy there. But I always try and get back to people, through and again emails. I get to the office extremely early in the morning so I can check emails, because as soon as other people come in, and I'm pretty much done working and I'm dealing with issues. But so I try and do that, and we can either set up meetings or Zoom meetings or phone calls to do that. One of the things I think that sometimes becomes a misunderstanding is what the Department of Agriculture's overall rule is. And no, we're here to help, we're here to listen, we're here to do all that things, but we also have a regulatory role, if you will. And so our folks are just doing their job, and I hope people understand that. But as you mentioned, if there's a good reason for us to make a switch, whether it's policy on our side, our procedures, or if it's rule or statute, we can be there, because as I mentioned before, we know there's going to be changes. We want changes for the better, and the better that this program can run it and the better for the industry, we're all about it. But again, most of those rules were written for the consumer safety, and that's what we want to see.
Yeah, patients come first, right, in this new program. With limited licenses awarded to cultivators, processors, and pharmacies, do you anticipate Utah Medical Cannabis Program will become more inclusive in the future?
Boy, that's a great question, and it's probably one that's out of my pay grade, to be honest with you. It really depends on how things go. As we mentioned at the beginning, we didn't necessarily have the amount of supply based on the number of patients that came through. I mean, 14,000 different individuals right now, between the 8,000 plus cardholders and still 6,000 license or letter holders. I don't think we did that. So I know that there's concern on making sure that we do have that, but I do think that, as I mentioned, that the licensees that we've got were the right picks, because they're trying to do it right. There's always hiccups in a new program. But again, I can't say that it won't be more inclusive too, because there's always those changes, whether it's on the hemp side or whether it's bringing hot oil or whatever else can be used to help, and on the medicinal side. Or I can't tell you. No, I don't know what that looks like yet, but I do think that there's no way we can not keep it from being more inclusive.
Right, and I think you and I can both agree that the demand and the way that patient numbers are going right now, that's probably going to be the biggest factor in where our program goes in the future. So I can't harp to our audience enough that if you use cannabis as a medicine in the state, register and get your card. One, you're helping the program and putting it in the right direction, but two, you're helping yourself at the same time. So I commend you, Cody, on what you're doing here, and all the growers that you're keeping an eye on, the processors as well. Is there anything else you'd like to end with?
No, I just appreciate the ability to come on here. It's great to finally meet you, and I appreciate your allowing me to speak and to really kind of, I guess, agreeing with me that we're all kind of on the same team. Although maybe there's times it doesn't feel like that, but our job is to make sure that there is this program that is safe and as affordable as possible, and hopefully we can keep working to make that what it is.
You're right. We are on the same team, and we're moving forward. So keep up the great work, Cody, and we'll be checking in with you here pretty soon. Thanks again.
All right, thank you, Cole.
Well, Cody, that was great, man. I appreciate you. You want to keep in contact with us? We'll definitely be reaching out to you as soon as things progress. It was really great timing that we had this meeting last week. So we have a small crew at Salt Lake City. I got this thing started.